Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the massive 40-year career of Jamaican politician Daryl Vaz. We're talking about a leader who is literally a walking contradiction. He's a man who completely reshaped national infrastructure, but had to navigate some seriously intense legal friction to do it. Let's look at the data and the history to really understand the legacy of this highly complex statesman. Seriously, just look at this paradox. He's often described as a highly pragmatic, results-oriented leader who loved to use direct regulatory leverage, basically an executive disruptor focused on quick, tangible wins. But at the exact same time, his career was an absolute magnet for relentless legal and diplomatic battles. So, how does a leader juggle sweeping policy reforms with such intense political controversy? Let's find out. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the roots of his power, move into the dual citizenship crisis, check out his executive reforms, unpack the scandals and legal battles, and finally, look at the twilight of his political dynasty.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, Roots of Representational Power, Dynasty, and Organizing.
So, born in 1963 into a prominent JLP dynasty, Vaz basically had a front-row seat to state power his whole life. But, he didn't just coast on the family name, not at all. He brought a real entrepreneurial hustle, actually becoming the founding president of the Jamaica Used Car Dealers Association. He completely revolutionized the local auto market. And by 1986, he took that business savvy, combined it with his family background, and became a hands-on local councilor. He literally built this fiercely loyal political machine from the ground up.
Which brings us to part 2, the dual citizenship crisis, a true constitutional landmark.
Okay, so picture this. It's 2007, and Vaz wins his general election seat. But there's a massive catch. Because his mother was born in Puerto Rico, Vaz actually held United States citizenship. Well, his opponent slapped him with a lawsuit arguing that traveling on a U.S. passport violated the Jamaican Constitution's rules on foreign allegiance. And guess what? The courts agreed. His election was totally annulled. So with his political survival on the line, Vaz formally renounced his U.S. citizenship in 2009. This whole saga was so huge it sparked a national audit of lawmakers across all parties.
Now, you might think getting your election voided would be the end of the road, right? Well, the numbers tell a completely different story. In that voided 2007 election, Vaz won by a margin of 944 votes. But after that brutal legal battle and renouncing his citizenship, he ran again on the 2009 by-election, and his mandate didn't shrink. It absolutely exploded. He won by 2,289 votes. It just goes to show how incredibly resilient his local organizing machinery really was.
Moving on to part 3, executive action and reforms. This is where we see the disruptor in power. As a minister, his impact on the environment was honestly historic. In 2019, he spearheaded this massive ban on single-use plastics. We're talking styrofoam, plastic straws, and those single-use carrier bags. But the really brilliant part was how he did it. He didn't just drop the hammer, he framed it as a public-private partnership. By doing that, he achieved a staggering 90% commercial compliance rate. I mean, that is huge. It firmly established Jamaica as a regional leader in conservation. And he brought that exact same disruptive energy over to the energy sector. He went straight after the restrictive Jamaica public service monopoly. His goal? Lowering those national electricity tariffs for everyday consumers. So, in July 2025, he issues a notice of non-renewal to JPS. Boom. Then, he brings in international experts for a reform process in November, paving the way for a competitive, multi-operator setup by March 2026. He really used his regulatory leverage to force through these massive structural market changes. You can see that same pragmatic approach with his 2025 National Rural School Bus Program. Before this, commercial private transit was costing families anywhere from $300 to $600 Jamaican dollars a day. Vaz brought in subsidized buses and dropped that student fare to a flat $100 a day. Now, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of initial pushback, especially since they had to retrofit the imported buses to have left-hand passenger doors for safety. But he pushed right through that friction to deliver massive financial relief to vulnerable rural households. But here's where things get super interesting. We've got this fascinating administrative paradox. Independent evaluators looked at his localized constituency development fund disclosures and gave him a perfect 100% transparency score. 100%. Yet, if you look at his formal attendance in the legislative chamber, it sat at just 58%. It perfectly captures his whole vibe. Intense, on-the-ground constituency management and getting projects done, but often skipping out on the routine parliamentary debates.
Okay, let's turn to part 4, Scandals and Legal Battles, the Lightning Rod. Because right alongside all those massive legislative wins is a pretty relentless history of friction. You've got factional disputes during the 2003 tainted money scandal, and then a highly publicized police bribery charge in 2012. In that case, opponents actually alleged he offered a cop gold bars to drop a traffic ticket for an associate. Gold bars! But the whole thing completely collapsed in 2015. The arresting officer testified he couldn't even recall the specific details or words used, so Vaz walked away with a full legal acquittal.
But the friction didn't stop there. It reached international levels in 2019 when the U.S. Embassy actually revoked his visitor visa. And it gets crazier. When they temporarily reinstated it in 2021, it came with this severe annotation, a 212D3 waiver. In U.S. immigration law, that specific code indicates a suspicion of historical involvement in illicit drug trafficking. Yeah, heavy stuff. As you can imagine, the publication of this waiver sparked intense domestic pressure demanding he be dismissed from the cabinet.
However, the way this international crisis resolved was just as dramatic. Former U.S. Ambassador to Jamaica Donald Tapia publicly stepped up and exposed the initial visa revocation as an uncorroborated, politically motivated blunder. A joint investigation requested by the Prime Minister found the allegations were entirely false, zero evidence. Ambassador Tapia even took these exonerating findings directly to nearly 50 U.S. senators, formally clearing Vaz's name on the diplomatic stage.
We also have to talk about his operational controversies, like the Starlink acquisition in early 2026. The Auditor General flagged Vaz for breaching public procurement acts when buying these satellite terminals. But here's the context. Category 5 Hurricane Melissa had just wiped out national communications in late 2025. Vaz argued, very vigorously, that bypassing slow, standard procurement protocols was both legally and morally justified because it prioritized human lives and emergency connectivity. So it raises this huge governance question. When does emergency relief actually justify breaking standard protocol?
And his legal battles definitely weren't just defensive. He's also gone on the offensive to protect his legacy. Right now, he's using the judiciary in a highly calculated move to permanently shut down a decades-old whisper campaign. See, for nearly 40 years, political opponents circulated this tragic rumor connecting him to the 1980s murder of a student, Diane Smith. This was despite definitive proof that Vaz was actually living and studying in Florida at the time. After an opponent allegedly referenced this rumor at a 2023 conference, Vaz launched a massive Supreme Court defamation lawsuit scheduled for 2026. He's seeking a permanent injunction to just clear his name once and for all.
Finally, we arrive at Part 5, Twilight of a Dynasty, the final chapter.
The year 2025 really marks a definitive turning point. Citing deep fatigue with the destructive underbelly of politics and wanting to focus on his family, Vaz announced his retirement. And this departure happened to coincide with a massive shift locally. His wife, Anne-Marie Vaz, actually lost her parliamentary seat in the 2025 general election. Taken together, these events signal a pretty definitive end to the political dynasty that fiercely organized northeastern Jamaica for decades.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're left looking at this incredibly complex dual legacy. Will Daryl Vaz be remembered mostly as the pragmatic disruptor who permanently modernized Jamaica's environmental laws and energy grids? Or will history focus more on the intense political noise, the constitutional battles, and all that legal friction? It's a true paradox of power. Ultimately, how you view his legacy depends on a question we really have to ask about all our leaders. How do we weigh concrete structural results against deep institutional friction? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer today, and keep questioning the structures of power around you.